Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. We're been reviewing some videos that he had highlighting some Jordan Peterson points, and it's been exciting and refreshing. So let's just say hello to the Rabbi. Shalom, Rabbi. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Uh, and all the people watching. And you're in charge. You're the host. So we're going to start with the Jordan Peterson's rule number 11.
Rule 11 is don't bother children when they're skateboarding. And that's a meditation on the difference between weakness and goodness. You see, one of the things that's happened in our society, and especially with regards to our attitude towards men, but also our attitude towards the masculinity in women, so it's just as toxic for women, is that we seem to have concluded that strong men are dangerous, and that's partly because we think Western culture is a tyrannical patriarchy, and the only reason you get to the top is because you misuse power. And everything about that is pathological and inexcusable and shameful. I mean, first, the claim that Western culture... Like, how many civilized countries are there in the world? 3 dozen? The rest of them are run by brutal thugs. Right? And it isn't just thugs at the top, man, because that isn't how it works. In a country that's corrupt, the corruption is spread through the entire country. So, and we're not like that, and that's that. I mean, Western culture is fundamentally honest, and so partly chapter 11 is a call to encouragement. It's like, you want, and I've been telling young men in particular, but young women as well, though they don't seem to be quite as in need of the message, to adopt responsibility for their life, to tell the truth, and to understand that their failure to participate fully in being leaves a hole that's precisely the size of their soul in the cultural landscape. It's no joke, but that's what chapter 11 is about. And it's about people who are the enemy of the human spirit, the people who restrict children's play, for example, which is a particularly pathological thing to do. There's a movement now to not let children have best friends. It's like, really? What the hell, man? That's so... There are so many things wrong with that idea that would take another lecture just to scrape the surface. But mostly it's just... Well, I would not even start on that.
Well, this title of Don't Bother Children While They're Skateboarding is a little ironic because you would think that he's going to be speaking about children, whereas really he spends most of his time speaking about seniors, the people, the leaders, the older people who have built the society, and particularly spend some time defending the attributes of Western society, the culture of Western society, and denigrating other societies that are run by thugs, as he puts it. And so he spends quite a bit of time, and he's right on. There is a problem among certain segments of our population that disparage our immediate past and feel that we're living in a patriarchy that's oppressive and unfair to many groups within it. And he rants against that. And I agree with him. My problem is, what's his practical advice how to get out of that? You don't often encounter children skateboarding that's going to solve the problem. So how can we actively do something to change the way we feel? And you have to do something that changes your subconscious, because you're sort of living in this culture and this attitude all around you that society is no good, society is to be fixed, etc., and which is not true. But how do you remind yourself to think differently? And so I have a very practical suggestion from Jewish teachings. There is an instruction in the Torah to rise up before your elders and to beautify those of very old age, to honor those that are older than us, starting from the age of 60 or 70, as long as they're an upstanding citizen, they're not a a crook or a criminal or a drunk. I'm not talking about the dregs of society, but anybody who's a civilized person who's reached that age is to be considered a leader, is to be considered almost like a sage, like a wise man, because they have the benefit of their years of experience. And so, to remind ourselves about this, we stand up when we're in their presence. That is, when you're sitting and an older person walks into the room, you rise. You rise to show them honor that they're someone of that age. And you can sit down, but that simple act reminds you to appreciate the wisdom of years. And you need that reminder because, as I said, you're living in a society that has forgotten that. When I was a kid, everybody knew this. When we were riding on the streetcars or the buses, and we were sitting down, coming home from school or whatever, and an adult, any adult, not 60 or 70, but for us kids, any adult, 30 years older or something, when they came in, we got out of our seat. We offered them our seat. If there's still a seat available, then we sat down. But you don't sit while an adult's standing. It was not allowed. We seem to have lost that attitude among children. As a matter of interest, I would trace it back to John F. Kennedy, who was the youngest president ever elected. And when he did get elected, there was a sea change in mental attitude, and that same thing has continued through the day, that we are more youth-oriented society than senior. Before him, everybody respected someone of an advanced age, and after that, because he was the president, and I'm not arguing, they should so respect the president. I mean, the president's like a king. You have to show respect to a king, to a leader too, and since he's young, but that had an influence. Look, we do live in a society that's ever changing, especially the rapid pace in computer technology is changing so many things so fast, and the young people are more adept at keeping up with it. So there's good reason to listen to the youth, and they have what to tell us. They're much more agile on their feet in that respect. But the seniors are much more knowledgeable about the human experience, the human spirit, which was what Jordan Peterson was talking about. Don't lose respect for that, because people do not change. The nature of humanity does not change. The technical paraphernalia around them, that changes, granted. But you still have to put on your pants one leg at a time. That's always going to be the case. And that speaks to all kinds of experiences of the human spirit. And people of advanced age have more of those experiences and are more wise in their advice on these issues. I'll give you one example. People of advanced age are much more accommodating to others. They understand that you don't have to fight with everybody you meet. You can accommodate, you can let the other guy live your life and let the other guy live his life. That's a so valuable piece of advice. You can't change the world. That's going to take a long time. But personally, how you feel about things, you can help yourself when you start respecting seniors and recognize the wisdom and accomplishments of the human spirit that preceded you. Then you'll be much better able to build on that and create your own wisdom that eventually you'll be able to share again with the next generations coming up behind you. Stand up for those of advanced age. Remind yourself about the quality of the human spirit and the human experience.
Wow.
Final rule. It's called pet a cat when you encounter.
Oh, I don't want to jump into. Did you have any comments on that, Rabbi Schwartz?
Did Ronald? Did you have any Hadassahs here?
No. No, very straightforward and to the point.
A little bit, yeah. I think the skateboarding comment was about children, right? And don't interrupt them while they're skateboarding. I think a lot of interruption with childish mindsets has led to cancel culture. after doing these broadcasts for a number of years here, I've learned just don't engage with trolls. Just cut them off. It's just the only solution, right? Because they don't stop. They feed on the childish behavior, and I think that's what he was implying with the don't.
Maybe.
But I did like your comment about what's his name, John F. Kennedy. I mean, did they not stop? Generally, men stopped wearing hats at around the time of John F. Kennedy, because he didn't wear a hat. Like, it was a popular fad. Like, a lot of traditional Jewish men will wear hats, and it was very popular in the 50s.
Everybody wore a hat. He killed an industry.
Yeah.
He killed an industry. Everybody stopped wearing hats when he was president. But did you have that experience, Ronald, when you were a kid, riding a bus or?
Oh yeah, it was automatic. We stood up.
Yeah.
It's normal. I thought the hat thing was during World War II, because they wanted the materials.
I'm not sure in Australia, but I know here in the West, like New York, there was always, like in the 40s and 50s, there was loads of people wearing hats. Men wore hats. They were a thriving industry, hat industry.
Eisenhower wore a hat. Eisenhower, the president, they wore hats. They wore hats when they went outside. There was the pictures of them wearing a hat. And with Kennedy, that all changed. But so you stood up in the bus when you were young. Do they do that now in Australia?
Not usually on that sort of transport, since I got a driving license, but I would say probably not. The little bit of experience I have had, I would say no. They just consider that, I paid for my ticket, it's my seat.
Theirs. Yeah.
I paid for the ticket. I'm just as entitled as you.
Right.
And we get back to that word entitled, don't we?
Right. So it's a tear in the social fabric, really. That we used to have. The fabric was nicer, and we haven't gained anything by losing that. But parents don't tell their children. They don't teach their children to respect authority anymore.
Any form of discipline is considered abusive in a lot of circles, and
that's a big loss.
And it is when you're not able to correct or direct as a parent. There's the parenting is lost, for sure. Okay, so number 12 is our last one on your list. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. That sounds interesting. Let's get into that.
Final rule. It's called pet a cat when you encounter one on the street, and it's the most personal chapter in the book. It's a lot about my daughter. And my daughter was very ill when she was a kid. But, and as a test of your faith, there's almost nothing that's more direct than a serious illness inflicted upon an innocent child, right? And so the chapter's a meditation on that. And, you have to look for that little bit of sparkling crystal in the darkness when things are bad. You have to look and see where things are still beautiful and where there's still something that's sustaining. And you narrow your time frame and you be grateful for what you have, and that can get you through some very dark times. And maybe even successfully if you're lucky. But even if unsuccessfully, then maybe it's only tragic and not absolute hell. And you can do that, in the worst situation. You can make it only tragic and not hell. And there's a big gap between tragedy and hell. There's nothing worse at a deathbed than to see the people there fighting. The death is bad enough, but you can take that, terrible as it is, and make it into something that's absolutely unbearable. And maybe I think, and this is sort of what I closed the book with, is this idea is that if we didn't all attempt to make terrible things even worse than they are, then maybe we could tolerate the terrible things that we have to put up with in order to exist. And maybe we could make the world into a better place, and it's what we should be doing and what we could be doing because we don't have anything better to do. And that's what the book is about. And that's the end of 12 Rules for Life.
In this chapter 12, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Jordan Peterson reveals the deep religiosity with which he lives. You might think he is not a religious person because earlier he refers to the billions of years, which is sort of contradicts the Bible story, and he relies on psychology and science. And so you might think that he's not a religious person, but he reveals how deeply religious he is in this chapter because, well, one thing is the phrase, beautiful phrase he uses, that when you don't take responsibility for improving the social landscape, you leave a hole exactly the size of your soul. Wonderful poetry there. What is a soul if you're not religious? There's no such thing as a soul. More than that, his conviction that you can always face tragedy and make something out of it, make lemonade out of lemons, to use another phrase, displays a faith in the future. And there's no reason, if you don't have religion, if there's no God, if there's nobody organizing this universe, then there's no reason to have that faith in the future. In fact, even the people that profess that they're not religious, I think, are deep down religious because they'll try to improve the world with climate change or population growth or other socialistic tendencies or rules or methods of government. They're seeking to make a better world. Why, if there's no God, if we're all here randomly an accident, then the only thing that makes sense is to pursue your own pleasure as much as you can and forget about everybody else. And I know you're going to argue with me, but think about it. If there's no God, then that's really what everybody should do. The fact that they don't is proof itself that everybody deep down believes there is a higher purpose, a higher calling, and that's we can call God. Really the argument is about the nature of God, but that there is a God, I think everybody intrinsically knows. Getting back to the point here is how can we train ourselves to confront those setbacks in life? That's what we're getting at. And Jewish teachings has an answer, and it's a phrase, Gam zu latova. This too is for the best. Although I don't like that translation. I prefer this too can be for the best, because it's up to us to take action and make something better out of it. But that is a phrase that you should have constantly in your head, because we all, every day, we run into things that disrupt us, that disappoint us, that challenge us. And the proper response is to always say, this too can be for the best. If the world is not random, it's being run by a creator, and even though I may seem to be a small cog that, I slip through the cracks, not so. Look, Google responds to you with 3.7 million responses in 0.002 seconds. Google is something we invented. If Google can respond so immediately to you with any question you put to it, then the creator of the universe also has time and interest and the power to respond to you and to organize your life. And if things happen that are not that welcome, that means that there's a response that you have to develop to overcome that challenge. That challenge is there for you. The Gam zu latova. This too can be for the best. You can rise to the challenge. You can make something out of this. You can make lemonade out of lemons. So anything that happens to you, Jewish teaching is have this attitude that God is in control of the world. He's running it. He's looking after you. He's concerned with you. He's paying attention to you, just like Google. And your response has to be, now what do I do about it? And that changes your whole life. Gam zu latova. This too can be for the best. It can. Okay. So
very interesting. A good way to end the note on that book, A Selfish God, for sure. That there is the trials of life are just that. They are opportunities to graduate and move on to something higher.
And not by accident.
No.
They're designed right for you to. This can be for your best moment. That's why it's being presented. So if you will, we have about 10 more minutes. Unless, Ronald, do you have anything you want to say?
No, not at the moment.
There's nobody else live here. So, Dan, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I'm good, Rabbi. Do you want me to make you a host? Have you got something you want to share?
Yeah, make me a host, and then I'll share the thing that I have here.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, just getting ready to do that.
Bottom green button.
No, I know what to do. I didn't set it up yet. Where is it? Okay. All right, now I come back here.
Big shout out to James, who's watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Excuse me.
Okay. All right. So this is the appendix, 199 mitzvahs that I introduced earlier, the number, and I'll read it. God created something out of nothing, dividing nothing into two somethings that affect each other. There should be a word by. God created something out of nothing by dividing nothing into two somethings that affect each other. That is, they have a relationship with each other. The whole universe is composed of those relationships. God's mitzvah instructions train us and mold us into creating positive relationships, our own masterpiece additions to the grand design orchestrated by the creator of all. Here is a copy of my chapter 13 table of the 7 Noahide categories, identified by Rambam, showing the number of individual mitzvahs that I include in each. Idolatry, there's one change here. This used to be a different number. Idolatry is 36, blessing God's name 65, murder 24, illicit sex 26, robbery 23, justice system 15, and do not eat a limb from a live animal 10. They total to 199. Following are individual charts listing the mitzvah instructions in each category. In the column listing the source verse, the verse number equals x.yy.zz, wherein x is the number of Moshe's book, 1 to 5. YY is the chapter therein, and ZZ the verse number. In a later work, I hope to explain why I included each mitzvah, where that is not intuitively obvious, and expound on the mitzvah details. For some of these mitzvahs, I have already described more detail in an earlier book, Jewish Teachings for Christians and Other Good People. It's on Amazon. Where in that book these mitzvahs are discussed is referenced by JTC X.Y, where X.Y is the appropriate chapter number in that book. JTC stands for Jewish Teachings for Christians. And so that you'll see that phrase appear on the chart. My focus in that book was on describing 30 mitzvah instructions that are widely practiced as a result of Western civilization having adopted many Torah instructions. I thought that once people became aware that their behavior was already shaped by the Torah, it might convince them to adopt more Torah behaviors. Category 1, idolatry. The details in this category immediately raise the following questions. Did people in the past really bow down to artifacts that they themselves made of clay or wood or metal? Did they really sacrifice hard-earned assets to placate these emotionless artifacts? Were these people able to think? There seems to be such a disconnect between their thinking and ours. Why should we pay any attention to these Torah instructions? Rambam had these questions too. He answered as follows. As the Torah documents, the first generations were intimately aware of their Creator. They were emotionally driven towards God and searched for ways to connect to God. For example, both Cain and Abel offered sacrifices without being asked. The reason they had to search was God's insistence on keeping distance. Enosh, the leader of the third generation, made a mistake. Instead of concentrating on creating earth-centered relationships, as God was nudging by keeping distant, he sought to forge heaven-centered ones. Look, he said, God has given the celestial bodies a position of prominence. We could honor God by honoring them. The logic made sense, and he was the leader, so people brought in. Enosh should have foreseen what would happen next. The people concentrated on what they could see, namely the celestial bodies, and forgot about what they could not see, namely God. So, in addition to avoiding God's desire for earth-centered relationships, he even undermined people's natural search for God by substituting heaven-centered adulations. The next step was taken by manipulators who proclaimed, I have an important message from the stars that you'd better listen to. Today we call this scamming. Once they learned how to get people's respect, they continued with self-serving messages. They succeeded and idolatry flourished. The Torah cannot legislate against gullibility and stupidity. The very essence of being human is learning how to overcome these foibles. What the Torah can do and has done is legislate against repeating the obvious errors of the past. These laws appear in the chart below. Hopefully, humble study of past errors will inoculate us against stumbling into new forms of the same. In chapter 13, I gave two examples of how people to this day create idols for themselves. We may not be able to prosecute them as pure idolatry, but it should surely be useful to recognize when we start straying after false hope. And so reading down this, consider no power other than God. Do not perform idolatry, which is, in other words, if there's an established thing that people do, and you'll still find some of this in India, I understand, where there are temples and gods, and I understand it was once as an issue that people came and sacrificed their hair. They would cut off their hair, make themselves bald, and throw it to the idol, and that would be a form of idol worship. Do not prophecy in the name of an idol. No, just don't be one of those people that says, I gotta tell you something with the idol. Do not listen to a prophet of an idol. Somebody comes to you like that, you should not listen to them. They're scamming you. Don't listen even. Hang up. Do not seduce anyone to idol worship. Now, if you're trying to get someone, and even if this prophecy might be trying to get respect or recognition for yourself, and now you're trying to seduce anyone into the fold so to become your member. Do not favor a seducer to idol worship. So if you know somebody that's trying to do this, don't show them any favors, and if you can prosecute them, do so. You have a duty to unmask them. Don't stop hating a seducer to idol worship. That is, you can't not do them favor, but you should actively work against them. Do not save a seducer to idol worship. This talks about where you've gone to court, or let's say you find someone like that in a dire circumstance. If you know someone's evil, like that misleads people, etc., don't help them out of a tough spot. That's the instruction. God has put them into a tough spot. God obviously wants them there. Don't forget that God's running the world. So you have a duty to help people, but only if they're in your good players in your game. If they're evil players, then not only don't you have a duty to help them, you have a duty not to. Do not swear in the name of an idol. Do not, participate in any kind of reverence or respect to the idol. Do not worship an idol in the temple way. That is, supposing there's a particular idol worship that has, like, for example, the example I gave you where they would come and sacrifice their hair. So that's the way they worship that idol. They don't bow down to the idol. They don't slaughter animals to that idol. But the temple worship, the way we worship God, there was 4 special activities that we had in the temple that we were instructed on how to offer sacrifices. So any one of those activities, if they were performed for an idol, that would be desecrating the activity itself. You're taking an activity that God accepts and then using it to a non-God. That would be obviously just undoing what's right and proper. Do not incite a person to idol worship. Do not you become a seducer. Do not make an idol to serve. Even if you're not going to serve it yourself, but don't make one. Let's say I can make money like this. I can build. People will buy my product. No, do not do that. Do not make an idol to sell. It's the same idea. Do not use anything from an idol's service. So that was the in that case, this became an issue in that many women wear wigs, and this place where they worshiped the idol and sacrificed their hair, so that became a place where the businessmen came and did business with the priest, and they were buying all this hair. So the hair actually had an evil source, and it became quite an issue in the Jewish community because there was a lot of women wear wigs, and so we find out that we had to investigate it and make sure that the hair was not coming from idol worship service, even though you didn't know when you bought it that it did. But the idea is you don't want to allow the idol worship service to have any um, cascading effect and result in any profit to them. Do not use an idol's ornaments, same idea. Some things have been donated to them and to adorn them, so don't you use them. Do not benefit from an idol or its rituals, whatever that may be. However, you might find you could get a benefit from. Don't. You'll find a better way. Do not form a human image. The thing that's most likely to be worshipped as an idol is a human image. So we don't make human images at all. And there's some details about that. It has to be life size. So if you have a little bust, that may be okay. But it's not a full trigger. So there's details that's for another book. Do not marry an idol worshiper. This I discussed in the other book. So here it is, JTC 2.3. That's the number of the chapter. There was 6 sections, 5 each. So 2 is the section and 3 the chapter. Do not marry an idol. Don't marry someone of a different faith, really. Even if you like each other and you've got a different faith, it's got to be a big part of your life, your faith, and if it means anything. And to marry and start a family gets so involved with someone when your basic concepts are at odds with each other, it's like just asking for trouble. So that's good advice. Do not favor an evil person. So anybody that's wicked, do not show them any favors. Don't give them benefit of the doubt, stuff like that. Don't read idolatrous ideas, fake news, we can call it today. But like, if somebody's written, like, let me explain to you why this is really, and you see, like, it doesn't make sense on the surface of it, or it has no attraction for you. Don't say, well, let me give them my shot. No, don't give them my shot. And do not behave like idol worshippers. Don't assume or behave like they do. So, if they, sometimes you go to a foreign place and you say, well, everybody's doing it, so I'll do that. No, you don't do that. You don't participate. You don't give any succor. It's too important an issue to give lip service. And we're out of time, so I'm going to stop at 21 as the age of consent, and so that it will remember to come to this next section tomorrow. We continue. Anybody
interesting stuff. I wish you'd send those lists to us. I found that very, very, very useful and interesting. Can I ask a comment though?
Got it. I sent it out. It's an attachment to tonight's email.
Oh no, I just checked the email. I don't have any attachment on there.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. So.
I mean, I got the Zoom link in the email. I checked it before I asked, right? Anyways, my point is, in modern day, when it comes down to idols, what is the halakha position on branding, in the sense of product branding? I mean, there are certain brands that have cult-like following, loyalists, if you will, but there's a lot of practices behind the scenes that people use to enhance on public social media their brand per se, and how to identify a brand. And you see a lot of symbols, and like when you consider McDonald's, everybody knows those golden arches, right? All around the planet. I mean,
but they're not promoting any worship.
Well, I mean, okay, I guess not in the old school sense of for sure, but I mean, there are some brands that are almost cultic in loyalty.
Apple.
I
think
just wanted to get your feedback on branding.
the true answer to this is opens up a whole hornet's nest, and that is sports. When you get into sports, you're dealing with people.
Right,
And
right.
then you start identifying, now you start worshiping stars and so on. And that's where you run. So you're not going to worship golden arches or, you know, Microsoft or Apple. You know,
Well, I thought they did worship Apple, actually.
Sorry?
I thought they did worship Apple because Apple have created that
Yes.
environment,
It's like they
that microcosm environment of,
yeah. So
and lock you into their system.
right. Become accolades, but nobody's worshiping, nobody's expecting it to create something for them, or it's an easy.
Yeah.
They like that too, and so on. So there can be a fine line, and so but you have to be able to define that line, and are you praying to it? Are you treating it like a god, or are you just treating it like a source? Like this is the best group to go to. So you got a favorite doctor. He's the guy he knows how to look after me. So that's not worship. That's
So paying attention, like somebody who is vegged out watching too much TV or video games, that wouldn't be considered an act of worship, then, right? I think some people in their video games are pretty addicted.
I discussed that a little bit in chapter 13.
Ah.
Go back and look at it.
All right. Well, yeah, there's definitely some stuff there I would like to review for sure. It's a question of fitting it into my busy schedule. But, well, thank you for tonight, Rabbi. And I look forward to hearing more tomorrow of the mitzvahs. And, so we're going to sign out for now. And we'll be back same time tomorrow.
Okay, good. And I noticed Hadassah was here earlier.